there's almost a silence as the ball's going over or through Kiko Casilla, and then just pandemonium. There are limbs, and I saw people everywhere. It was like the beaches of Normandy. It was chaos. It was just pure chaos. No one will ever take that moment away from a football fan. Ever.
Hello and welcome to the Second Tier Podcast. I'm Ryan Dilks and I'm joined by the Kiko Casilla to my Elan Meslier. It's Justin Peach.
Good day to you, Ryan.
Oh, Justin, can you feel it? Can you smell it in the air? The playoff final is on the horizon. It's got me very, very excited, particularly down there. It's making things happen down there, Justin. Yes, of course, I'm talking about down in London. Don't know what else you could possibly be thinking when I say that. But here we are, Justin. We're just days away from the playoff final, the epitome of every championship season. So you know what? We thought we'd take this moment to look back on some of the greatest moments in playoff history. And I'm excited for it because you know what? The playoffs are probably the highlight of my season. It's our Christmas, isn't it? And we've had some bloody great moments over the years. So let's rewind, let's turn the clock back and relive them. Why not? Hey, you. What are you doing? No, seriously. What are you doing? We've got a live show coming up on Thursday and you haven't got tickets yet. Come on. This is our first ever Second Tier live show. Get yourself tickets. You'd be stupid not to. You've got yourself a bumper preview show of the playoff final. You've got yourself hot takes, debate, yourselves getting involved in the conversation. And SBK, our betting partner, will be providing free bets on the occasion. And it's only £5. You'd be daft not to. It's at the Honeyman at Hayes next Thursday at 7. Make sure you get on it. You can find a link in the description of this video.
Yeah, let's reminisce. Let's think back to the good times when the world was still, I don't know, better because of football. I don't know where I was going with that, but it's the better times because you know it's the championship, it's the playoffs, and to be honest, if you rewind to any championship playoff period, they are the better times because that's, as you say, it's our Christmas.
Yeah, it is. And it has so much twists and turns, as we've seen already in this playoff campaign. So, you know what? Let's talk about some of the best which we've had in previous years, Peachy Boy. Welcome to the number one championship podcast, the Second Tier. Thank you for joining us wherever you are, ladies and gentlemen. So, as we say, we're going to be looking back at one of the greatest moments in playoff history in this very episode. We're kind of doing a top three. So, we've got another episode coming out tomorrow, and then another one after that with our top three greatest playoff moments. And in this one, we're talking about one which I think it's safe to say is quite dear to the hearts of certain people around this table. It's the Championship Playoff semi-final second leg between Leeds United and Derby County from 2018-19. Some may call it the Jack Marriott moment. Others may call it the perfect example of Leeds United falling apart. Just to we may as well get into it. Am I right in saying you were at this game?
Yep, I was, and unsurprisingly, I was late as well. I was late for kickoff.
That is not a surprise to anyone. I don't know why you said surprisingly.
But the traffic getting into Leeds was the issue, not me being blasé with my time. But this genuinely was one of the most incredible moments I've experienced as a supporter. And this is the big thing about the playoffs, because even if you don't go up and don't get to the playoff final, as a fan, you will always have the moments within a season, within a playoff campaign. You will always have those moments, and I will always have that feeling I felt when Derby won this game, when Jack Marriott scored the winner, etc. I will always have that feeling. No one can ever take that away from me. Despite Frank Lampard doing his best to ruin things in the final, he didn't.
And
in
what
this
happened
one.
afterwards.
And of course, what Mel Morris did afterwards. But this is genuinely one of the most incredible experiences I've had as a supporter. The atmosphere at Ellen Road was incredible. It was a stuffy, warm night. So it was that sort of deodorant smell you get from everybody. I can remember everything, every single sense. I can remember it.
There we go. Well, let's relive those senses, shall we, Justin? So let's take the listener back. It's the 15th of May, 2019. Marcelo Bielsa's Leeds were 1-0 up after the first leg at Pride Park. Up until that point, no team in Championship history had ever won a playoff semi-final after losing the first leg at home. Now, prior to this playoff campaign, Leeds had pretty handedly beaten Frank Lampard's Derby on both occasions. Derby squeezed into the playoffs, finishing 6th, whereas Leeds were in the top 2 for most of the season, and it wasn't until the final few weeks of the season where they really dropped off. But, of course, that wasn't the only subplot here, was there, Justin?
Yeah, the old Spygate. Which is what made it extra spicy, because I mean the celebrations afterwards and celebrations from Leeds players, etc. Oh my God, yes, this added some volatility to the game, needless volatility, because it really was a nothing scenario. But obviously Marcelo Bielsa sending out a scout or a club personnel in Leeds training gear to Derby's training ground to spy on some training sessions ahead of a game in December, which Leeds won 2-0, or January, the winter period, which Leeds won 2-0. Just added to the spice, and you felt it. You really felt it.
Yeah, you did really feel it. A bit of more context around that. So, in January 2019, Derby called police about a man who was acting suspiciously around their training ground, and it turned out that man was an employee of Leeds United. A day later, Marcelo Bielsa admitted he had sent the man to spy on Derby. He also revealed he had been doing it for years, including with other championship clubs. And then there was that infamous... Is it infamous? That PowerPoint presentation where he revealed everything he had learned about the teams and why he'd been doing it this whole time.
Such great bastardry, isn't it? Yeah, I've been spying, and here's what I've learned about every single team. This is what Harry Wilson's going to do. He's on set. Oh my! It's genuinely one of the most incredible scenarios I think I've ever witnessed as a football fan. That isn't like a big high-profile scenario like in the Premier League or world football. This is a man who's admitted to spying on other football clubs and then leaking said information to the world. It's just brilliant.
It was incredible. Truly one of the most controversial moments in Championship history. I think it's got to be said, but one of the most standout as well. But ultimately, we had this, but Derby and Leeds weren't the best of friends anyway for historic reasons going back to the 70s. This Spygate just added another wrinkle to things. But anyway, let's get on to the game. So the game starts with Leeds 1-0 up on aggregate, and they come flying out the traps. They had 5 shots to Derby's 1 in the first 25 minutes, and then Leeds score. Stuart Dallas bundles it in. It's 2-0 on aggregate now. It looks like it's going to be a long day at the office for Derby. In fact, Justin, when that goal went in, with you being at the ground at the time, what was going through your head? Did you think this is going to be a long day?
Yeah, I think I turned around to my mate Dan and just said to him, not that we should go, but like, what was the point? Because as I say, like you get into this, you get into the ground and you're pumped up and the atmosphere is booming and the Derby fans are trying to sing over Marching On Together, and it's a great atmosphere. And then obviously in the first sort of 25-30 minutes, Derby then go a goal down and then you're 2-0 down on aggregate, and it's like, Jesus. Like at Ellen Road as well, with that atmosphere, you dread it. You dread an onslaught, and especially with that Frank Lampard team that did beat Leeds in this game, but they were shite. They weren't great, and they scraped through the playoffs when they shouldn't have. You dread the worst. So yeah, a lot goes through your head, and you ponder whether or not to just go down for a pint and then come back and then reset as a supporter. But we didn't. We stuck it out, and we got our rewards.
Yeah, I was going to say, but it was looking bleak for Derby at that stage, wasn't it? 2-0 on aggregate. And then what happens next just makes it look like it's going to be an even longer day, because Matthias Klick hits the bar. Leeds have a penalty shout turned down. It looks like Leeds were going to be wiping the floor with Derby. But then Derby hit the post. You think to yourself, oh, okay, that's come against the run of play a bit, but never mind. It's a warning shot, but yeah, fine. Everything will be okay. Derby then make a substitution, still in the first half, by the way. That's how it was going for Derby at that stage. They bring on Jack Marriott. And I was watching the highlights for this again earlier, Justin. The commentator, I think it's Daniel Mann, he says, oh, Jack Marriott's coming on. We'll see how that changes things.
A prelude to what was to come.
Yes, I wonder how that's going to change things, because just seconds after he comes on, disaster strikes for Leeds United. The goalkeeper, Kiko Casilla, has an absolute mare. The ball gets played back. He has a mix-up with Liam Cooper, and it gifts Jack Marriott and Derby a goal. And Justin, knowing what happens next in this game, how big a moment do you think that is, the Kiko Casilla mix-up with Liam Cooper?
I think it's incredibly significant because it silenced the crowd, because it came from nothing. It literally came from nothing. I know Derby hit the post, but yeah, that moment came from absolutely nothing. And when that happens, it shakes the players. Well, no, it shakes the crowd, and if the crowd gets shook and they go quiet, then you know the tension then runs through the pitch, doesn't it? You feel it as a supporter on the sidelines, and then you get your tails up and you think, okay, actually, this Leeds team's there for the taking, especially with form going into the playoffs. That drop off, that insecurity, that lack of assuredness, it disappeared really quickly. And then obviously half time came, and it was Derby fans felt the belief because they sung all the way through half time. Players coming into the tunnel, like the noise was just incredible.
Yeah. And the thing is, I think you're right. The fact that it happens just before half time, I know you hear some people say sometimes it's a good time to score, and I'm not necessarily sure that is true in most cases, but here it definitely was, because it clearly got to the Leeds players and fans who had to kind of dwell on it for 15 minutes. And then what followed was the collapse of all collapses. Mason Mount equalises the score on aggregate just 1 minute into the second half. How good was that finish, by the way? Doesn't get talked about enough. No. Mason Mount's basically on his arse when he lobs it over Casilla.
I'll add as well, at half-time there's some footage. I think Derby released it, but it came out on socials, obviously during after the game. But Scott Malone sort of comes in, and you can hear the Derby fans, and Scott Malone comes in and says, "These boys are fucking rocked." And you know that was the turning point, that half time, that goal, that atmosphere coming down. And obviously you felt that because going straight into that second half, Derby came absolutely flying. In a minute into the second half, Mason Mount pulls off that finish and equalises. On aggregate, things change at that point. Leeds are rocked, Derby are on it, and as I say, the quality of the finish, and almost the fortune, as you say, like he's on his arse. It's not. It's a composed finish, but almost an accidental one, because he's falling as he's putting it off. To do that, in front of the Leeds end as well. It was just ridiculous. And as I say, the turning point was half time. Yeah,
and then following the Mason Mount goal in the 58th minute, Derby go ahead after Leeds give away a stupid penalty from Liam Cooper. I've watched that so many times. Yeah. No idea what he's doing. And all of a sudden, Derby have gone from being 2-0 down in the 44th minute to ahead in the 58th minute. It's unbelievable. However, Leeds get a bit of hope. They get a goal back through Stuart Dallas. A brilliant goal as well, to be fair to him. A brilliant finish. So it's 3-3 in the 62nd minute. Which way is the momentum swinging now? Because before it was all going Derby's way, and then that Dallas goal gives you a bit of give Leeds a bit of leeway in that regard. And then the next few minutes are as tense as it gets. Both are so afraid to put a foot wrong. And then Gaetano Berardi gets sent off for Leeds in the 78th minute after a daft challenge when he's on a yellow. It's a blow, but it's not the end of the world. You know, Leeds can still cope. They can still win this from this stage, Justin. Mm-hmm. But then it happens. Derby attack. Mason Mount has the ball. He passes it to Richard Keogh, of all people, who plays an inch perfect ball to Jack Marriott, and he dinks it into the net to earn Derby the win late on and complete the comeback. And Justin, you were there. Tell me, dear boy, how were the limbs?
Yeah, I'm getting goosebumps just hearing it back. I don't know why. It's incredible, because I've seen the footage and seen the goals so many times, but just that moment, it's a collective, isn't it? When you're in the stand, the noise that comes from the stand as things build. Obviously, the ball goes into Richard Keogh, and it's like, oh, go on. It's that collective go on, everyone's sort of, again, obviously no one expecting Richard Keogh to pull off one of the best passes anyone will ever see in their lives, but he does, and it's, I say, it's perfect. And then for Marriott to put it away, there's almost a silence as the ball's going over or through Kiko Casilla, and then just pandemonium. It's just crazy, and there are limbs, and I saw people everywhere. It was like the beaches of Normandy. It was chaos. It was just pure chaos, utter carnage. I saw one guy had to, I don't know if he broke his ankle or severely sprained it, but he was in a really, really bad way. He didn't let it impact his celebrations, but I saw his leg bend away. It shouldn't go between the seats because he was on the seats as it happened. Saw that happen, and obviously he stayed for as long as he could, and then got not carried off, but it was on people's shoulders, stewards' shoulders, then going down into the concourse. And it's just that sort of chaos, and that's what I mean. Like, no one will ever take that moment away from a football fan, ever.
That takes limbs to a whole new level, doesn't it? Literal limbs. That's incredible. But as I say, I was watching this game back earlier, Justin. The composure from Marriott to just dink it over Casilla in that scenario is remarkable.
Yeah.
Because, last minute of the game, the stakes don't get much higher than that. Most players would, just lace it or side foot it, or even take it around the goalkeeper. But to just dink it over like that is bloody composure at its finest, isn't it?
It really is. And, in Marriott's defence, he had periods of that throughout that season before he really sort of, the wheels came off for him as a player in the Championship. He had periods of that sort of level of composure, and you think, well, it's £5 million well spent. Well done, Mel Morris. Until the following season, obviously, but yeah, that level of composure in that magnitude of the game in that period of the game. He's come on at half time, so he's probably exerted a lot more energy than he anticipated as well. Mentally, it's going to be tough. And probably maybe the surprise at receiving that pass from Richard Keogh as well. Yeah. might make him second guess what's going to happen next or alter his run. But he did what all good strikers do. He gets between the fullback and the centre half, and he's composed from there. And you cannot mistake the quality of the finish. It was the sort of composure that that really good strikers have in those moments. And Marriott proved it.
Yeah, it was remarkable, and that was it. Derby were through to the playoff final. Cue limbs, even further limbs in the Derby ends. The Derby players running over to the Leeds fans, doing the spy goggles,
binoculars
gesture, binoculars. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. Doing all that dancing in front of them. It was carnage. But ultimately, Justin, Leeds fell apart. It's the ultimate example of Leeds falling apart again, isn't it? Because it was a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, I think that's the remarkable thing. And then the scenes afterwards were almost pretty sad, because obviously Pontus Jansson came back outside of the dressing room, sat against the advertising hoardings, devastated. I want to say that Calvin Phillips was in tears as well. It really felt like an end of an era situation for Leeds. But obviously that wasn't the case, and they came back the following season and won the division. But there was a lot of uncertainty. People were expecting Bielsa to leave and all that. It was just one of those games where literally everything fell apart, and the game was actually a microcosm of Leeds falling apart, because obviously there was the Kiko Casilla mistake with Liam Cooper that allowed Derby to get back into the game. There was the red card from Berardi. There was the penalty, giving away the penalty from Liam Cooper. It was the ultimate Leeds falling apart in 45 minutes. A time where it didn't need to happen. As you say, it was. They fulfilled their own prophecy there. But have they fallen apart since? Yeah, sort of, but not really.
Well, going back to what you were saying about them falling apart, I think you've also got to take into account their flat end to the season that they had. Because I think that did play a part. At the end of January, Leeds were top of the league, 6 points clear of third place. They had only lost 6 in 29 at that point. And then from that point onwards, they lost 7 in 17. Mm-hmm. That includes their final 4 games where they won just 1 point. Most notably, of course, that infamous loss at home to Wigan, who had only won 7 points on the road all season prior to that game. It's not quite Leicester levels of dropping Leeds, but it's comparable. But my point is, Leeds already had a sense that they were falling apart, and as soon as they had the slightest wobble in the two legs, that was it. Their heads were gone.
Yeah.
And you're right, Justin. At the time, Leeds fans thought that was it. They'd blown their big chance because there was a lot of talk about Bielsa, whether he was going to stick around or not. Eventually, he did do that. But I think a lot of Leeds fans sense that we may lose not only the manager here, but this group of players who have got us to the position they're in. And that's why it just made the feeling all the more worse for Leeds.
Well, that's the crazy thing, isn't it? I don't think people understood the feeling that Leeds fans had, obviously being out of the Premier League for so long, obviously being such a big club, dropping out to League One, being administration, selling all their star players, blah, blah, blah. You know, there was a lot of rhetoric there and a lot of narrative against Leeds. Obviously, there's the Ticino years. They went through a lot. And then finally they had this messiah drop down to him in Marcelo Bielsa to save them. And, you know, it felt like Leeds were being very Leeds, even with this untouchable human being in Marcelo Bielsa. And I mean that with the utmost respect for this guy, because I think that Leeds team played some of the best football I've ever witnessed at Championship level. They were remarkably good. They were incredible. And, to fall the way like they did. I mean, there was talk even on the radio on the way home of Bielsa coming out and giving out a statement saying he's resigning. Emotions were that high. It was ridiculous. It was, as I say, there were vivid things that you remember. I say emotions were so high that that's what the feeling was. Wasn't the case, obviously, for all the good it did.
Yeah, you're right. It wasn't the case. It is quite mad to think that, as memorable as this game was, these teams went in completely different directions afterwards, and not the directions that they probably envisaged. Of course, Derby lost in the playoff final to Aston Villa. After that, they would almost implode as a club and go down to League One. Meanwhile, Leeds went in the exact opposite direction. Promotion the next season, and then a good 3 years in the Premier League. But not only that, I mean, look at some of the players in the squad. Many of that Leeds squad would play for them in the Prem. Calvin Phillips would go on to have much success, even if he's not had a great season this season. Patrick Bamford would go on to play for England. Jack Harrison's in the Premier League. So, you know, a lot of this team will go down as modern-day Leeds legends, despite falling at this hurdle. Whereas you look at what happened with Derby and the players here. Yes, there was Mason Mount, Fikayo Tomori, Harry Wilson. They were all on loan and have had a lot of success since then. But you think of the man this episode is mostly about, and we'll talk about him a bit later on, Justin, Jack Marriott. He's been playing with Wrexham in League Two this season, which gives you an idea of where his career's gone since then. Richard Keogh, of course, was involved in that car crash just months later, and his career was never the same again after that. Mason Bennett's now a bench warmer at Burton. Tom Lawrence's career hasn't really taken off as much as he would have liked, and many other players just retired after that. The point is, Leeds had more success than Derby afterwards, but that one night at Ellen Road will go down for many Derby fans as one of the most enjoyable nights, if not the most enjoyable night, supporting their club. And I think let's talk about Jack Marriott, Justin, the man who basically made this moment, really, not only scoring the winning goal, but also scoring the goal which really set off the dominoes. He is, as I say, now playing at Wrexham in League Two, obviously promoted, but he's barely played since joining in January. And since that goal, the final one against Leeds, he scored 34 goals in 164 games. So to think where his career has gone after being on top of the world is pretty remarkable. But at the same time, he will be dreaming of that moment for the rest of time, won't he?
Well, rightly so, because he lived the moment, didn't he? Yeah, you know, it was a career defining moment for him. Maybe not in the way that he envisaged, but you know, Derby fans will always have that. Although his career didn't go the way it should have done, and he cost Derby a lot of money, and ultimately he was one of the key reasons as to why he wasn't. But the money spent on him was one of the key reasons as to why Klopp went into administration. It could muddy that moment, but I don't think it ever will. Because I say it was such a big occasion. Obviously, he did score in the playoff final as well, albeit it was from a Martin Waghorn shot that came off his heel. Yeah, but he still got the accolade of scoring in the playoff final for Derby. It wasn't his fault that Frank Lampard didn't start him, but gone over those grounds many and many a times, and I have recovered from that. But yeah, the way his career tailed off, I think he was victim to a lot of things. Firstly, I think it was a bad transfer, obviously. I don't think Derby should have spent the money on him. That would have added pressure. He was an injury-prone forward as well, which isn't always a player's fault, but just couldn't stay fit, couldn't stay injury-free. And as well as that, he was a certain type of striker that needed to play in a certain type of way. Philip Cocu came in the previous season, possession-based manager. He needed a big number 9. Jack Marriott wasn't that sort of player. So I think there's a lot of circumstances that worked against him and ultimately cost him his confidence, and injuries didn't help either.
Yeah. It's just a bit strange, isn't it, how you think of some of the players who have given us some of the best moments ever at championship level, particularly in the playoffs. I won't list them off because I don't want to give anything away about the upcoming episodes. But they have gone on to have pretty brilliant careers, many of them going on to be playing more games at Premier League level than Championship level. And Jack Marriott has gone the complete opposite way, but he had that one moment. And you know what? I think... I mean, is he a Derby favourite, would you say? He's definitely not a Derby legend, but does this one moment qualify him enough to be a Derby favourite, Justin?
I don't think so. I mean, it might sound harsh, but I don't think so. Unfortunately, he's given Derby fans one of their best moments, but for him to be considered a local or a modern day icon, I don't think it's quite fair on the other players who have come before him and after him and stuck by the club, because again, a lot happened after that. The contract situations, etc., that we don't need to get into now. But as I say, I think despite what happened after, you'll always have that moment, and Derby fans will always have that moment, and he'll always be remembered for that moment. And once he's retired and becomes an after dinner speaker, that'll be a big story for him. If he chooses to go down that path, obviously. Yeah,
of course. Justin, I've got one question for you to just kind of round off this whole episode. Is this the greatest comeback in playoff history? Maybe even championship history? What would you say?
Certainly the playoffs. I mean, by definition, it is, isn't it? Being factually spot on, it is one of the greatest comeback in playoff history. No team had ever overturned a 2-0 deficit, and no team had ever overturned a playoff final home defeat in the first leg either. So, by that factually, it is the greatest comeback in playoff history. But I think the magnitude of the game, the narrative, the subplots supporting it, Richie Keogh doing what he did, with his assist, there's just so many things to pull out of it. So I think it's certainly one of the most memorable. But in terms of comebacks, yeah, it's got to be. I can't really think back to many teams who have been able to do this. I guess especially against a Leeds side who are so strong, and a stadium like Ellen Road as well.
I think when you add all that, you've got to say it's definitely the biggest in playoff history. I think, considering it's the playoffs and there isn't much more at stake than that, probably is the greatest comeback in championship history. There may be other ones that's what I'm just not thinking of right now. Maybe something on the final day, perhaps. I don't know. But in terms of, the playoffs, it doesn't get much bigger than that, does it? And I think you're absolutely right in pointing out the strength of this Leeds side and, the fact that it was miles ahead of this Derby team, despite Derby having a couple of very talented individuals in there. But I think that's beside the point. You have got to say this is probably the greatest comeback in championship history, let alone playoff history. I think we've covered just about everything there, Justin, apart from one final thing which I wanted to mention from this game. The Athletic reported afterwards that Derby left the changing room in a right state after this. Broken ceiling tiles, rubbish everywhere, and perhaps most notably, a dubious brown substance on the floor. Any thoughts on that, Justin?
The playoffs it brings about some weird stories, doesn't it? I remember the same thing happened with Brighton Crystal Palace in the 2012-13 season, where I can't remember which team it was now, but there was a team accused of leaving a mysterious brown substance in the middle of the change rooms then, which galvanised a Crystal Palace win, so it would have been Brighton. Maybe there was a shite in the middle of the playoff, in the middle of the changing rooms. Maybe there wasn't. Only whoever left that can speculate and know the truth. One of the
greatest mysteries in football history.
It really is.
Was there a dubious brown substance on the floor? And what was it? and maybe even whose was it. Anyway, this has been the Second Tiers Playoff Rewind as we count down some of the greatest moments in playoff history. We love the playoffs, Justin, so we will once again see you tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen, to have another chat and look back at one of the other greatest playoff moments of all time. So we bloody look forward to seeing you then. I won't give too much away, but all I'll say is I'm not sure Justin is going to be as buoyant in the coming episode. We'll say that much for sure. But anyway, this has been the Second Tier Podcast, and we'll be back again tomorrow with another Playoff Rewind moment. I've been Ryan Dilks.
I've been Justin Peach.
And a big thank you for listening.